So we're at the Mishnah on Kuf Daled on the base. Someone said, Mida b'chevel ani moichelach. I'm selling you karka, and I want it to be measured by a rope. Means he said a lashon that is very precise. I want it to be medactic, and therefore we said in the previous Mishnah, when one says that lashon, any mistake is a reason to undo the deal. And then he said, Hein chaser, hein yaser, more or less, which is the exact opposite, or at least generally understood to be the exact opposite. Batal hein chaser, hein yaser. Batal hein chaser, hein yaser, mida b'chav. The second lashon is mevatel the first lashon. We say that he said it the second lashon, and he thought it over, and he decided this is what I'm going with. So the second lashon is the one we go with. And the Mishnah gives another example of the same rule. Hein chaser hein yaser mida b'chevel. If he did it the other direction, he first said more or less, and then he said a precise lashon. Batal midas b'chevel hein chaser hein yaser. The second lashon is mevatel the first lashon. Divrei bananas. This is the words of bananas. It comes out. You see this all around Shas. This Mishnah says the rule. We're on the Mishnah on Kuf Daled on the base. We just looked at the Mishnah. Mishnah said one rule. It said the shita of bananas, that if someone says two opposing lashons, he first says, I want this to be, I'm selling this karka, and I want it to be under precise rules where I want it to be exact. And then he says afterwards, more or less, we follow the second lashon. If it's the other way around, if he says more or less, then he says precise, then we follow the precise rules. Amar Rabbi Abba Ma'amal Amar Rav. Cholkanov Chaverav al Benanas. This Mishnah says Benanas is shita, but there are others who disagree with him. And this is not a what do you call it? The endorsement of either shita. He's just pointing out that bananas is not divrei hakol. He's saying his own shita. In fact, Gemara, my kamash malan. What do I need, Rabbi Mamal, to tell me that this is only bananas shita, that we follow the second lashon? So we have this in the Mishnah. Ma'isa b'tzipayri, and we saw this in Bava Metzia. We had a story in Tzipar with someone who rented a bathhouse from his friend, and he told him the price is 12 zehuvim for the year, and then he also told him 1 dinar per month. So he clarified, or he said after he said 12 zehuvim per year, he said 1 dinar per month. And then, as the Rashbam explains, the Gemara over there explains, it turned out, of course, it was an Iver. So you have 13 months. So the question is, do you follow the first lashon of 12 zehuvim per month, 12 dinar per month, or do you follow the second lashon, which just says 1 per month, in which case he'll have to pay 13? They asked Reb Shimon Gamliel, and Rabbi Yaisi, what's the story? They paskened, they have to divide it up. So it's going to end up being 12 and a half dinar. The last month they're going to split. We're not sure who we pasken like. If we go bust to the first lashon or bust to the second. So we split it in half. You divide up the last month. So we see from there clearly that they are not holding like bananas in our Mishnah. According to bananas, we should follow the second lashon. It should be the renter has to pay 13 because the second lashon was dinar l'chaydish. We should have to follow the second lashon is the one that we follow. So you see that there's a chaylik on this. When the Rabbi Yaisi and Rabbi Chadina are chaylik. If that would have been your source, that there's a chaylik on bananas of a Mishnah, havamina, hasam hu delikal mehada kahadabe. That case is different. Over there, I could say when he said Shnei Masas Zuhum Lashon Dinazav L'Chodesh, the one possibility is to say, like Banana said, that he was chayzer from what he said first within the Terkei Dibur, and therefore the second lashon is operative. But there's another possible interpretation of what happened. That he's explaining himself, which the Rashbam explains to mean that he's not Ein Chanami. He first said, I want it to be 12 per year. And the second part is not saying, when he says Din al Chaydish, he's not saying what the price is. He's saying what the payment schedule is. He's telling him, you have to pay me every month. I don't want you to pay 12 at the end of the year. So if he's Prushe Kamafarish, if he's just saying the payment schedule, so he's certainly not changing what he had said originally, that he wants it to be 12 for the year. So he's only entitled to 12, and so then the renter should only pay a total of 12. But our Mishnah, in the case of the Mishnah where Banana said Mida b'chavel, and then he said afterwards Henchasa and Yasser, or vice versa, the two things are opposites. There's no way of understanding it as being anything than Haderbe. Over there, maybe even Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would agree with Bananas. So Kamashmalon. So that's why Rabbi Abba bar Mamal Amarav had to say they are cholkim on Divrei Bananas, because from that Mishnah you could have had a different way of explaining it. You could have said that over there the reason why it's split is because we're not sure whether it's Hadabei or Kaprushi Kamafash. But that's not applicable in the case of the Mishnah. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Zu Divrei Bananas. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says, B'Shem Shmuel, this shita that we say in the Mishnah, that we follow the second thing that a person says when he says two opposite things, we follow the second. We say he retracted the first one, is going with his second. This is only Bananas. The Chachamim say a different shita. Before we said that we follow it's a suffix and yachleiku. The Chachamim, they say that Banana says like this, but the Chachamim say halach acha pacha shabul shaynis. Basically, we're going to give the tie to the that gives the least to the lekech. He says that the lekech is the one who's trying to be mitzi. If someone says, right, in the case of our Mishnah, where he said mida b'chavel ani moichalach, and then he said hein chaser hein yaser. So the lashon, if let's say the seller added extra property, so if he says, if it's, let's say, less than the amount that would have to be returned under hein chaser hein yaser, so the lekech would get to keep it. So we say we would follow mida b'chavel, because now the seller has given his money, but he hasn't yet made a chazaka in the karka. So we're trying to decide what should he get. So he doesn't have his money. He paid the money to the seller, and the seller hasn't given him the property yet. So he's now trying to say, you have to give me the karka, the base core plus, because I'm saying, you said hein chaser hein yaser. He's a moitzi mechaveri, and therefore we're going to go with the meicher as opposed to the lekeach. When you have two lashonos and we don't know which one to follow, we're going to give it to the one who's a muchzik, which in this case is the meicher. So tomorrow, this lashon, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, zu divrei Bananas, is mashma zu v'loy svirale. The Gemara says this the way that Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel said, which is different than the first lashon. In the beginning of the Gemara, we said, Amar Bar Mamal Amarav Cholkan Alav Haver al Bananas, which is a powerful lashon, a neutral lashon. It doesn't indicate a preference. But in this case, the lashon of Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel seems to be endorsing those who are chaylik on Bananas, because it says Zu Divrei. This is Bananas, but others are chaylik, and those are more convincing. So So that's mashma that Shmuel does not hold like bananas. But Ravu Shmuel the Ami Chavayu, Kur b'shloishim ani meichalach. If someone says, "I'm selling you a kur is 30 saw, b'shloishim for 30 sela." So I'm selling you what comes out to a price of 1 sela per saw. But he said it b'loshin. I'm selling you a kur for 30 sela ani meichalach. Yachalachsa ba'afilu b'saw achrayna. He could be chayzer up till until they finish selling the last saw out of the 30 saw, because the way the transaction was formulated, it was an entire core of 30 saw for 30 sela. So until the whole thing is handed over, the transaction is still in motion, and either one of them could be chayzer. If he says core b'shloishim saw, core b'shloishim, I'm sorry, a core of 30 saw for shloishim sela, and then he says saw b'sela, and then he says each saw for 1 sela, ani meichalach, I'm selling to you. Rishon kana. Each one is sold individually. So this sounds like this is again Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel is saying that we go Basra the second lashon. If we're saying that it could be that each saw is kind of separately, that means we're ignoring the first part that he said kur b'shloishim, and we're following the second part that he said saw b'sela. We're saying each saw is being sold individually. This is an endorsement of bananas. But before we had said, Shmuel had said, Zu divrei bananas, avacham mayrim, halachachar pachashel b'shaynis, which is mashma the other way around. That they didn't, that Shmuel did not agree with bananas. He didn't paskin like bananas. So tomorrow, elazu v'svirale. It must be that even though the Gemara wants to first say that even though it says Zu divrei bananas, it means Zu divrei bananas v'svirale, but and he agrees with him. Even though it sounds like he's saying I disagree, it's not necessarily dispositive. We don't follow that mashmois of lashon. The Gemara says, but you have another problem. You brought a raya that Shmuel does hold like bananas, but we have another raya that Shmuel doesn't hold like bananas, in addition to the fact that he said Zu divrei bananas. For Shmuel, the Bava emtza chodesh askin. This din that we had quoted before, b'shem Rabbi Yossi B'Chanina, Rabbi Shem Gamliel, Rabbi Yossi B'Chanina, legabe someone who sold a bathhouse. He rented a bathhouse for 12 months, and he said first he said a lashon. I'm renting it for 12 months. I'm renting it for 12 zehuvim, 12 dinar, and then he said 1 dinar l'chaydish. They said, Shmuel said, it's only because the discussion about what should happen to the last month happened on the 15th day of Adar, meaning it's the middle of the Chodesh Adar, the third or whatever the 13th month. I don't know how it works. I guess maybe it's whatever's considered the last month of whenever they started, and it turned out to be an Ibayah. But it sounds like they didn't think about it in advance. But now it's coming to the 13th month, and he already paid his month every month, or at the end of the 12 months, he paid the 12 zehuvim. And now, after 15 days, the owner, the landlord says, you're going to have to pay me for the last month. He says, what do you mean? I paid you 12 for the year. And he says, no, I want if you got either give me the rest of my money, my last selo, or else get out. So they each a muhsik. That means the renter is a muhsik on the last dinner, and the seicher is a muhsik on the property, so he could tell him to leave. But if the renter came at the beginning of the chodesh, kuloi lemasker. If it's at the beginning of chodesh, then the masker wins because he's the muhsik. And we go to the end of the month, it all goes to the seicher, because at that point he already used the merchatz, and he's now the muhsik because the seicher, the masker, is trying to get money out of him. So this is like the chachamim who were chaylik before, that said we go achapachas shel b'lshaynis, because we say that the in our case lekeach is not the muhsik. So we see that Shmuel is paskening not like bananas. So we revert to having our original problem. First of all, that Shmuel said Zu Divrei Benanas, which is Mashi doesn't hold like it. But then we had wanted to say, um, I'm sorry, not that one. The second part of it, which is mashma like bananas. So how are we going to answer that? So we're going to have to go back to saying that Shmuel does not hold like bananas. So what's the explanation of where he said, at the in the case of Kur b'shloishim animachalach, I'm sorry, Kur b'shloishim sa b'sela, that we say we follow the sa b'sela. The toughest. We're talking about we're going back to the case of the merchatz. Gabe merchatz, I'm sorry, I'm reading the Rashbam. By the merchatz, the reason why it's yachloiku is because each one was typus his half, right? We said before, we're talking about where they went in the middle of the month. And that's also the explanation of the Rabbanan who say that you go after Pachas Shel Bul Shoinus, that you give we go like the Chachamim who say that you give the advantage to Lekeach, because again, he's the muhsik. So that's really what Shmuel holds.
Normally, he does not hold the bananas.
Right. He doesn't hold like bananas. He holds like the Chacham.
That must be a real variety. If you can't get it out of the guy's hand, to have more proof.
Right.
What does he hold the bananas in that one case? So
now the Gemara is going to ask, Chachanami or Tafis? Why don't we say Tafis?
In which case? In the case of
Kur
Shloshim.
Sabesel Animachalach. Rishon Kana. No, so that's a text. Hachanami hatafis. In the case of Kur b'shloishim Sabesel Animachalach, the reason why it's Rishon Kana is because we're talking about I'm sorry, no.
But the Merchat is saying the toughest.
I was saying no, but we have to answer because that's
we said
not like bananas.
That's the
right. The problem is the merchatz, where he said Ma'aseh b'tzipari, but Shmuel said b'ba b'hem tzachaydish askinu. Let me get this straight. I'm sorry. So Elam zuva loisvirally. Einachanami. Shmuel does not hold like bananas. So where we mashma that he holds like bananas? It's from this one, right? And the problem is there's a very long Rashbam which I went through and now let's read the top Rashbam for a minute. We only have a minute. Bazlina Basa Chazaka, Karaban, the Army Halakha, Solutions, Kelchme had the Rabu Shmuel, the Rishon Kana, the Mashma Toys, Lashatan, Lavainu Time. Do I didn't upper, Balmasab and Sala Korbala, Animakel, the Rishon Kana, Bisham, the Masafkalan, Itafsinum Lashon Rishon, Lashon Afan, Azlina Basa Chazaka. He says over there, the reason why it's Rishon Kana is because as long as we're not sure, as long as he's handed over money, at that point, once he gave over the son, he gave over the money, at that point, the chazaka changes. So it's not that we're paskening Rishon Kana because we're being twice Lashon Achad, but rather it's Rishon Kana because as soon as the seller handed over the karka and the other person handed over the money, so at that point, now at this point, the purchaser becomes the mufsik. He has the karka.
What was our Havamina?
Our Havamina was that we were following, it's really coming out in the end that it's following the second lashon,
Right.
but it's not because he holds like bananas. It's because he's the chacham hold you follow the mufsik, and he became the mufsik. So it really wasn't a good raya. So I'm just going to finish this because it's going to take only another minute. Amar Ravuna Amri Beirav Istera Meya Mai. If someone said an Istera, which is 96 Ma, 96 prutus, and then he said Meya Mai, and then he said 100 prutus, Meya Mai. We follow the second lashon of Meya Mai. Meya Mai Istera, you follow Istera. My kamashmal and twice lashon achron. Amarav Chadazimna. Amarav. This is you're saying like bananas that we follow the second lashon. Amarav Chadazim. Amarav Havi Hasam. Havi Hasam. Havi Hivna Kul Lamaske. He said in the case of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Chanina, by the case of the merchatz, I would have given everything to the maskir. I would have said that we follow the second lashon where he said, I give one, where it's one saw per month or whatever. I forgot what the amount of money, whatever the amount of money goes per month, not per year. And therefore he would have had to pay for the 13th month, the Ibr month. So tomorrow, no. Ma'al frushi kamafarish. This is a different frushi kamafarish. Over there, you would say that when he said, look at the lashon, when he said Diner Zav L'Chodesh, he's just being mafarish that which he had said earlier. Now he's saying that I mean it to mean that even though I said first 12, what I really meant just to say was that it should be 12 for the month. He's not being chayzer. That's what he really meant from the beginning.
A gold dinner for Chodesh.
Yeah. Even though I said 12 months, I hadn't thought about the possibility of an Ibr Yah. But now that I'm thinking about a possibility of an Ibr, so it's a Prushi Kamafarish. It's not a Chazara, but really said before. He just hadn't considered it, which is just to be careful. It's a different Prushi Kamafarish than earlier. Okay.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Shkayach.